Hey GP learners, do you want to know what it's like to podcast as a doctor? I do it all the time and I talk about it all the time, but hearing from other people is so much more useful. Well, in this episode I talk to Dr Haider Al-Hakim of the Surgical Spirit podcast that talks about more of the aesthetics around working in medical careers and also how that can impact you as a person. He started a podcast and we're going to hear about his journey in this episode, so I hope you find it useful. As always, you can contact me whichever method you prefer: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. Definitely subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and leave us a comment if you want, and definitely subscribe. And we'll catch you soon. Shall we begin? Hi GP learners. So in this episode I'm joined by Haider Al Hakim, a doctor down south if I remember rightly, who does some amazing stuff in terms of podcasting as well as supporting people in terms of their journeys, and I've had the pleasure of joining him on his podcast earlier in the year, and now he's returned the favour and joining me to talk about his particular journey. Are you out there, Haider?
Yes, I am. Hello, Gandhi. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Yourself?
Yes, good. It's raining outside, which is absolutely awesome. And the main thing is that we're indoors and we're speaking to each other on these funny machines.
Yeah. So it is a bit of a dreary day today, unfortunately. In the December weather, it's definitely showing us the British weather that we have. And
But we've got used to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Got used to this thing. And but you know, technology is amazing, and through sort of podcasting and through broadcasting, I've managed to speak to people all around the world, and they tell me about their lovely weather out there, and I do get jealous. I spoke to a interesting neonatologist. So she was in Pennsylvania at the time, and it was boiling hot there. She was sitting in the garden, you know, drinking her iced drink, and you can hear the sprinkler going off, you know, in the background. I thought, oh, you lucky woman. And I'm sitting here in, you know, dreary UK. But you get a nice vibe, you know, when you speak to people around the world, you know, through the podcast. You know, you get this kind of upliftment and, you know, sense of international togetherness and collectiveness.
Yeah. And like you said, it's the mobility of it, isn't it? I mean, like similar to yourself, I've had the opportunity to speak to people from abroad in terms of where they're based, but also people when they've been on holiday to actually catch up and in terms of, you know, create podcasting content. So I remember some of our listeners will know Ben Gowland of the General Practice podcast, and one of our recent episodes we actually filmed while he was in Spain. So he was in Spain, I was in the UK. Simple, quick, easy. We were done. And I guess that's the power that tech can allow. Doesn't always work. I guess, you know, tech always has its potential downfalls, but it can bring us closer together.
No, I mean, it works, you know, 95%, 99% of the time, and it's absolutely awesome. I mean, just imagine 10 years ago, it would have been pretty much impossible, or you had to invest hundreds of thousands of pounds into the, you know, technology, which only big corporations were able, you know, back in the day. And now we've got simpletons like myself, and I consider myself a simpleton. And it's amazing, and it's just broadened my horizon and my perspective and my outlook, and you know, that's what's so privileging to have as a podcaster and as a broadcaster, is that you can do pretty much amazing stuff with minimal equipment, and you know, you don't have to get expensive stuff as well.
No, true.
You know, it's sort of pretty accessible to a lot of people. But it does boil back down to, you know, like, you know, why are you doing it, and you know, what is your why for podcasting? Because there is a risk now that people do podcasting because everyone else is doing it, and I don't think that's such a good idea, because it is very time consuming, and you know, it is also it doesn't come across as well when you're listening to a podcast. Sometimes it just doesn't come across as if they really want to be doing it, if you know what I mean. Like the passion's not there.
True.
And like they're not all in. I don't know. I mean, some of the podcasts I listen to, I sort of totally switch off, because I feel that it's just another box that they've got to tick in their whole brand and their whole sort of persona and, you know, whatever they're pushing.
Yeah. And I'd agree. I think there are definitely some instances where people have got onto the podcasting bandwagon, because I know that many people see that the interaction you can have through a podcast is amazing. I mean, you can capture the attention of somebody for 10 minutes up to a couple of hours, depending on how long also your episode is, and you will have people listening to you for that length of time. I mean, even my wife doesn't listen to me for that length of time, so that's saying something.
Oh, my wife never listens to my podcast. I think, I think she's had enough of my voice, definitely, because I'm the one that talks a lot here in the house. I think I do most of the talking.
Wow. So what is your why then, Haider?
So for me, really, it was my health, really. So I was in Iraq at the time. I was doing, I was running several eye clinics and an eye hospital here in Iraq. So I was running a charity, and this was about 2009, 2010. And then I burnt out and had an existential crisis, and I was down in the dumps and, quite suicidal, actually. And for some reason, I sort of happened to come across podcasts. And I came across, I don't know if you know Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
So I came across his podcast back in 2011, beginning of 2012. And I just found it fascinating that people had this different perspective to me.
Yeah.
That this, this sort of different lens of the world. And it got me out of my funk, and it got me out of my darkness. And I've been listening to podcasts for, since then, really, all kinds of podcasts, mainly non-medical, because there weren't that many medical podcasts back in 2012, 2013. And I'm a good listener, and I make good conversation. And sort of after about 4 years of thinking to myself, well, I like podcasts, why don't I start my own podcast? So that was my journey, really. It essentially saved my life, got me out of my, the darkness into the light, from the darkness of non-podcast to the light of lots of podcasting. And I remember the first one I did, I did it on YouTube, and it was basically a mate of mine. He's an orthoptist. I said, mate, do you want to come on my podcast, and can I interview you? And we went on for about 2 hours just talking about random stuff. And then I did a few more on YouTube. Pretty pointless, really. It was sort of random, just sort of random chat about nothing particular. I mean, it was more about information and informative and sort of tips about different careers in healthcare. So that's how it started off. And slowly but surely, I think I found my niche of listening to people's stories and people's narratives, and how we can raise the spirits of people and inspire them and allow them to step into the space of health and wellness and positivity.
Sure. And I know definitely with those interviews and those stories, I mean, I've been fascinated by several of the ones that you've had, and you've had some amazing people come onto your podcast as well. I mean, first of all, you've had me, which is awesome.
Of course, absolutely, yeah. I mean, yours was really interesting because, you brought the, the whole concepts of mythology and the whole concepts of imagination and having inspirational figures that we were inspired by as children, and we can bring that into our workplace and into our livelihoods and into our adult lives. And really, it is about inspiration, and it is about raising people's energy and well-being to allow them to thrive and exceed one's own expectations.
And I know you've also had some really interesting ones. I mean, the one that sticks out for me is that you had Miss Great Britain, Miss UK. I can't remember.
Yeah, Miss
title.
England. Yeah,
Miss
Dr
England. That was it.
Basha. Yeah, Dr Basha Mukhejee, and she's really interesting. And for me, really, it was capturing that inspiring story and listening to these characters. And I love listening to different characters and interesting and let's say quirky people, not normal people who happen to be physicians or people in the health sector space. But yeah, I mean, she was immensely articulate, very beautiful, inside and out, and her story was really about purpose, about having beauty with purpose, and purpose is such a powerful thing. And when I do my podcast, it does raise my spirits, and it keeps me in the light.
So which would you say is your most memorable interview? And we're talking personally, so not for what you think is for your tribe, but for you personally.
For me personally, that's a difficult question to answer, actually. I think the best one for me was a lady called Shonette Basson. She's a teacher that created Disco Dough.
Okay, what's Disco Dough?
So basically, it's dough that you sort of play with.
Okay.
With disco music, and it helps children to improve their hand-eye coordination.
Wow.
Their focus, allows them to sort of learn better and just be sort of good students. It wasn't really that. It was just that she was such a bundle of fun. She creates so much happiness in someone and so much laughter. And I was literally, we were laughing for the whole hour that she was on. So, if you want an hour of fun and laughter, go to that, because I really, really enjoyed it. And, there was a great energy between us. I think that was the best one for me.
Wow. And for our listeners who want the links to all of those episodes, they will be in the show notes. So make sure you do check that out.
Super duper.
Easily.
And, these shows are quite candid. So, I am I do turn the place blue, and I do like to use all kinds of interesting words because that's who I am. And that's thanks to Joe Rogan, because he's quite a colorful character as well on his podcast. And I love comedy, and I do like to have a good laugh with my guests.
Yeah, so for those who don't know who Joe Rogan is, so in terms of podcasting, there's estimated about 700,000 podcasts actively out there at the moment, and that's compared to millions of YouTube channels and stuff. But with that, Joe Rogan is thought to be, I guess, the pinnacle in terms of followership. I believe he's thought to have the highest listenership across all podcasts, and he's a former MMA fighter who's basically turned his hand to interviews, and he always says that he just does it because he likes to talk. And that's all he does. His podcasts are of measurable length. I mean, they can be up to 2 hours in some cases, and he literally just talks. And through that, he's managed to develop an amazing listenership, and he's had some interesting guests as well. If I remember right, he's had the WikiLeaks man on his podcast as well. Short while back, I've forgotten his name, Edward Snowden or something.
Yeah. I mean, his most watched episode just on YouTube, it's been watched 27 million times, was Elon Musk. So he's had Elon Musk on there, and then he got him to smoke cannabis, and that made his shares in the company go down by 20% or something, just by
Well, Elon
I'm not going to
Musk,
make you smoke pot on my podcast.
That's fine. No. I mean, Elon Musk is, I guess, the closest thing to a real-world Tony Stark Iron Man that you could ever imagine. So, yeah, anything that man does has a sizable
And it was
impact.
a weird episode as well, because, the stuff that Elon Musk was talking about was kind of alien-like. He was going off on weird tangents. Whether it is the cannabis or something else, I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. So I guess with podcasting and stuff, I mean, I know I speak to several people who feel that, is this a route that they can use to convey the message that they have? And I'm always a big supporter of it, because I think it's a great way to develop a community, to share a message, to just, speak to people and things. But what is your perspective on not only just using podcasts, but I guess in terms of, obviously, like you said, it's logistically sometimes a challenge. How do you fit it in?
I don't think it's logistically challenging. I think it does go back to sort of purpose, passion, and meaning for you in your journey. So if it ticks all those boxes,
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the passion to do this? Do you have the purpose in life? Does it tick that purpose for you? Does it tick that meaning for you in life? So if those things are in place and it makes sense for you, then absolutely do it. Technology is there. It's very easy to get up and running. And you can fit it in to your schedule, whether it's once a week, once a month, once every 3 months. But it does boil down back to, is it fun? Is it fun for you? Does it raise your spirits? Does it raise your energy? Does it resonate with who you are inside? And if you can tick all those boxes, then absolutely go for it. And it's a real privilege speaking to these people, and as you said before, it's sort of creating these connections which otherwise you wouldn't have created. And us human beings, we love, well, most of us love, sort of social connection and sort of coming together and understanding each other. And it does wonders to your own self-development. Plus you can put it onto your CPD points and
Definitely
all that stuff, which is part and parcel of being a doctor in the 21st century.
Yeah. And interestingly, I think it's something that many people omit because they don't see it as something that has that kind of impact. But actually, I know for me personally, podcasts feature heavily on my appraisal and revalidation sections because I spent partly so much time doing it. But also,
do you get pushback by your appraiser saying, why do you have so much?
No, I mean, I've been quite candid about it, and my appraisers, I think, have been very honest about it in terms of, I say that I actually learn better by listening to stuff. And there are definitely people out there where, reading something or engaging with the e-learning course is not the way that they learn effectively, whereas listening or participating in something is a better experiential process for them. And for me, definitely, if I listen to something, I pick it up better than if I read it. I'd have to read something 2 or 3 times to get the same depth of understanding if someone's explaining it to me. And that's
I'm exactly the same as you. When I'm listening to something, and also I have to be scribbling with my left hand for some reason. If I'm sort of doodling with my finger and listening, that's the best way it sort of goes in. Plus argument, when I kind of, not argument, but question assumptions and question ideas and inferences, that tends to seep the information into my grey matter.
Yeah. And I think for that reason, I think that's why I'm a big fan of podcasting for many reasons. But I think as a learning tool, there's not many things that come close aside from, I would say, face-to-face, one-to-one kind of learning, training and that kind of thing. But the challenge with that is that can't always happen at the time that's convenient for you. Whereas the clear benefit of podcast, you can listen to it anytime, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my Royal College started a podcast, Royal College of Ophthalmologists, and then they invited me onto their podcast, and I was a guest on their podcast, and that was interesting. And, even the sort of traditional old school boys are getting into podcasting. And, it was great. I felt, I kind of got there, when your Royal College sort of invites you to their podcast.
Yeah.
Because of podcasting, I thought, wow, this is a good endorsement. But it works, as you said, for a proportion of people listening to other people's, even the voice, certain voices have a certain attraction to it and, a certain vibe to it. And it's a great suggestive tool as well.
So I guess with your experience, Haider, over the past, it's been just over a year now that you've been running a podcast. I mean, have you got any lessons learned that you would share with people in terms of your journey?
So I'll say the 3 top tips are: start small.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, be patient, because it takes a long time to sort of develop your style of interviewing, listening,
Mm-hmm.
listenership, particular genre that you'd like to address or
Mm-hmm.
slot into, and that takes time. So you may find that when you start podcasting, you're sort of dealing with certain issues, but that doesn't resonate with you as much because you're bringing guests who you thought would be a good idea, but doesn't quite gel. So take your time to find your kind of niche and your genre and your sort of topics and so on. What was the question again? I kind of didn't.
The lessons you've learned with podcasting.
The lessons that I've learned with podcasting.
So you mentioned starting small. What do you mean by starting small?
So just get basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think about quality that much. Just get it out there. That's the thing that I learned. Just get it out there, get started. And, that's what I mean by starting small. A lot of my colleagues who've, started podcasting have sort of gone straight into the sort of the big leagues and are expecting big listeners and big numbers. And they've gone for quality rather than quantity. So I think start small, work with quantity so that you find your kind of rhythm.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And then the second thing was, find your genre, and, that takes time for you to find your kind of sweet spot. And sort of thirdly, I've reached out a lot to the podcasting community. So I found that really, really useful. So, I'm part of quite a few, podcasting people who've been in the game a long time, and it's really good to sort of understand the industry and where the next big bang for buck kind of improvements that you can go towards. So go into the industry as a whole rather than just concentrating on the medical podcasting.
No, and I definitely agree with those. So you mentioned about the, start small. I mean, I'd probably suggest more, don't wait for perfection to mean that you can't start, I think, because I think, it has to be listenable. But you're right, that doesn't mean that you have to spend lots and lots of time or money making it that way. I mean, technically you can record a podcast with just simply a smartphone if you wanted to. But just starting is definitely important. And then in terms of speaking with others, collaboration is a key part, I think, in terms of helping you to learn and also helping you share. I've learned so much from other people that have been in the industry, more so than any course or any kind of article or stuff that may have shown me how to do things.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you keep experimenting, and that's what I did. Keep experimenting, and then keep failing really. And keep trying different things, and then sometimes something really works really, 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 really well, and you think, oh my god, right, and just sort of double down on that, and it seems to work.
So I have a couple of questions I ask all my guests when they come on, and I've not pre-warned you about these at all, which is always some of the interesting part that comes with it. So what would be your favorite work-based application or thing on your phone that you would tend to use?
I'd say YouTube.
Okay.
Everything's on YouTube.
Fair enough. Yeah, no,
whatever you want is there.
It is. So definitely from a learning point of view, I mean, I always tell people how I learnt how to do Dick's Horpike and Epley's maneuver through YouTube. I didn't go to a formal course or anything. I learned from people that taught you on the YouTube and stuff. Wow. They're definitely a good one.
Everything's there, yeah.
And so would that be also your favorite non-work-based app as well?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if I need to learn something or I mean, in my current work, I think it's between YouTube and LinkedIn kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's there on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
There's always someone there talking about something or teaching something or
Mm-hmm.
suggesting something or demonstrating something. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those two apps.
Mm-hmm. And definitely, if people want to see how to use LinkedIn as a doctor, welcome to listen to one of my earlier episodes that I did with Adam Harrison about how you can actually set up your profile, what LinkedIn is, and how you can use it as a clinician. Because there are some extra kind of little mini rules and stuff that you have to abide by. And I guess the other question I love to ask people. So imagine tomorrow morning you had a meeting with Matt Hancock, Secretary of State for Health, and he said, "Here you go. I'm going to give you £100 million to spend on health technology. I'll clear all the red tape for you. Don't have to worry about that side of things." How would you spend the money?
Looking at ways of improving physician health
Mm-hmm.
and healthcare professionals. So, if we can invest health tech into improving the health and well-being and wellness of physicians and nurses and healthcare professionals, I think that will improve our health system no
Mm-hmm.
end.
Definitely. I think often neglected is a part in terms of how the workforce can look after itself and look after patients better. And wow, that's an amazing way to spend the money. Maybe if Matt Hancock is listening to this, you may want to think about talking to you about it for
Yeah,
real.
definitely. Yeah, come and talk to us about it, and
Yeah.
that's what you need to invest £100 million into.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Cool. So, if our listeners wanted to catch up with you, Hader, where would you say is the best place for them to go in terms of learning more?
Yeah, so go on all the podcast platforms, iTunes and Google Podcast and Spotify and SoundCloud, and find me there on Surgical Spirit, which is the name of my podcast, Surgical Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Dr Haider Al-Hakim.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on Instagram as the Third Eye Doctor. That's my brand. I'm the Third Eye Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Website is thethirdeeyedoctor.co.uk. I mean, you can't miss me on social media. Just type my name and I'm everywhere.
Well, it's been amazing having you come and speak to us, Hader. I hope in terms of our listeners will enjoyed this episode, and obviously in terms of contacting you again, that's the Surgical Spirit podcast for the content, and the Third Eye Doctor on social media for any platform that you prefer. I guess it'd be a great way to contact you and stuff. And thank you for joining us. And hopefully our listeners will be able to enjoy this content and use it to help save them and their patients' time by tech enhancing their primary care and learning. Catch you next episode, guys.